Okay, so this week we will cover these topics: AWS Firewall, AWS Secret Manager, Shield, Messi, Athena, HSM, and KMS, right? So we will try to cover these three today and these four tomorrow. So before this will be again some of the design, right? First of all, we will understand that design, and then again we will implement that security configuration based upon that. So prior to that, right? So if I have to discuss any basic design of my cloud VPC in any of the region, right? So basically when we configure any VPC, so if this is my VPC, I hope I have recorded. 1 second, let me see if recording is on. Yeah. So if this is my VPC, if this is my VPC, so generally when we have to implement any of the security, right? So let's suppose I have one availability zone here. In VPC, I have this availability zone, right? Here I have application server or database server, let's suppose, right? To secure this host, right, in AZ level, what we can do, we can implement security group, right? With that security group, we can implement a layer 3 or layer 4 security on the basis of ports, on the basis of IPs, that which IPs or which ports can restrict on that, right? So this security group applies the security on the AZ level, right? Then we have on the VPC level, we have a network ACLs, right? That network ACLs works on that subnet level, right? So if let's suppose this is my 10.0.0.0/16 subnet, right? And I have created that 10.0.1.0/20. To implement that security on a network layer, right? On the subnet level, we apply that network ACLs in that VPCs, and then it is connected to IGW, right? And this is the common topology without deploying any of the security device in our environment, right? Or without enabling any of the AWS security services, right? However, let's suppose this is a common diagram, right? So if let's suppose this is internet, right? And from internet, if somebody is coming, it will hit to my IGW, right? That IGW is my internet gateway of my VPC, right? And that internet gateway is connecting to my availability zone, right? In availability zone route, we create one route table, and in that route table, we route all 0.0.0.0 towards IGW, right? And in that AZ, we have a devices. So that route table forwards all this availability zone subnet connectivity towards IGW, and similarly, as this is a stateful connection, so whenever reverse request will come through that IGW, it is coming. So earlier we deployed that firewalls on that availability zones for north south or east west traffic. Now let's suppose this is my UAT environment, right? Or this is currently very initial setups where I'm just starting migrations from my on-prem to cloud, right? And this is for a testing purpose, or I'm just creating a lab on the cloud environment for my corporate environment, where we just deploy and we do that testing. Or let's suppose I have this VPC, this VPC here, and this VPC here, and this VPC here, right? In this is in one region, this is in another region, and this is again on another region, right? So what earlier we were doing, there was one option to connect through that VPC pairing, right? So, okay, guys, tell me one option I have to connect one VPC to another VPC is through VPC pairing. What is the other option?
TGW.
TGW. Okay. Anything else? My application server is here, right? And my database is in this VPC. So what is the other option?
Endpoint.
Good. Very good. Other than that,
New in the market, Avitrix, we can use the hub and spoke.
no, that is a third party. Yes, sir. Anything else? Ideally, these are the three. Let's suppose if I have a firewall here, so I can build a VPN connection, right? So the most secure way to connect to the VPC is, guys, please mute yourself, right? So the most secure way is that we connect through that endpoints, right? Because that through that endpoints, we can limit that traffic based upon that service, right? So for what specific service we want to allow this communication, right? But now let's suppose all their traffic is either through TGW or through VPC pairing hits to this VPC, right? And from this VPC, it will go to internet, right? And right now I have not finalized which third-party firewall I will deploy on this VPC. So in initial phases, what I will do, I will use AWS own firewall, right? So I will use AWS own firewall. So if I will deploy that AWS own firewall, then what will be the design? So in that scenario, what will be the design? If this is my internet, right? That internet will send that request to my IGW, right? Means this is my VPC with IGW. IGW will route that traffic to AWS firewall, right? This is a virtual, again, backend firewall which AWS will provide, right? So this is a SaaS solution. So we just need to configure based upon that policies. But if I will enable that AWS firewall in my environment, right? Let's suppose after that, this is my production availability zone, right? Then what I have to do in this availability zone, I have to route traffic towards my AWS firewall, right? And then AWS firewall needs to route that traffic to that IGW. Similarly, in that IGW route table, right? As IGW do not have any subnet, right? So here we will use a one edge association. I will explain you how to configure that, right? So then IGW will again route reverse traffic to AWS firewall. AWS firewall will inspect that traffic and send it back to this, right? So if I have a two availability zones, one is production and one is non-prod, right? Then again, here I will enable firewall subnet, right? This firewall subnet will inspect that traffic and send to this. So basically, when I am saying for every availability zone, for every data center, I have to enable one firewall. So now let's understand that. Okay, VPC is already created. subnet route, what let's do. Yes. Okay, so here we will create our own design, right? So let's suppose this is my prod VPC, right? And that prod VPC, I'm going to create 10.0.0.0/16. I created one VPC, right? Now, in that VPC, I will create two subnets. One is for my firewall one, right? So let's suppose. So what is the minimum subnet range I can use in VPC? Harsh,
/29.
sure?
24/24.
Oh, sorry,
No.
/28 would be.
Good.
Minimum we need to use /28.
/28. Okay, so here in that 0.1.0/28, right? So this subnet I am using for my AWS firewall. AWS firewall. And what is the maximum I can use within that VPC?
60.
Sorry,
Yeah, /16.
16. Okay, good. So another one I am using prod app subnet. So let's go with 10.0.2.0/24. So right now, what we did, we created one VPC. That VPC is 10.0.0.0/16, right? And two subnets I have created, or two availability zones I have created. One is for my firewall subnet. That firewall subnet I am using 10.0.1.0/28, right? That is the minimum subnet I can use. And one subnet I have created for my servers or my applications, which I will deploy in that subnet. And that is 10.0.2.0/24, right? So now what is next? Now I need to create one IGW, right, with that VPC, so that internet connectivity should be up for this VPC. IGW. Okay, guys, so let's suppose I have a two subnets, right? And I want to attach two IGWs for both separate subnets. So how I can do that? Yes, sir. Anyone? Naresh, Harsh?
Yeah, IGW, I mean, we directly attach to the VPC. And then we have to, in routing table, we have to add out intent
No.
gateway.
that is fine, right? But let's suppose I want to attach two separate IGWs for two separate subnets. So how I can do that?
Ideally, in one VPC, we'll have one IGW.
Good. So we cannot attach two IGWs to single VPC. One VPC should have only one IGW, right? If your concept is clear, that's good. So now I have created one IGW here. Right. Now, next thing is that we have to do that routing. But before that, we have to deploy that firewall, right? So let's see if IGW is attached. Okay, so this IGW is attached with my production VPC. From subnet perspective, two subnets I have created. So let's go to routing table. One, I will create firewall route table. Next one, I will create prod app route table. And here one more route table I will create, that is for IGW, right? So this is new for us. This is prod VPC, right? Okay, so for prod one, right, let me add my prod subnet. For firewall, add firewall subnet. Done. So now for this IGW, right? So if I have created one route table for that IGW, right? But for IGW, I do not have any subnet because this is a backend device, right? So why then I have created that IGW route table so that I can define that whenever you have to send that request, your request should hit to this firewall, right? But currently that firewall is not connected. Let's go and create a firewall. Right, in VPC section, right, when you will scroll down here, you have an option of firewall. Okay, so create firewall. AWS firewall. For which VPC? This is for my production VPC. Sorry, this is for my prod VPC. I'm deploying. And I will deploy this in this VPC for which subnet I will deploy in the AWS subnet, right? IP address, I don't want to configure any static IP on this. We go to next. IPv4. I don't want a delete protection. I don't want a subnet change protection, so that whenever I want, I can change the subnet. I can delete anytime. Go to that next. Create and associate an empty firewall policy. So whenever we create any firewall, right, so we have to attach a policy, right? However, currently I have not initially configured any policy. So I will create one empty policy. I will attach that as a name. And after creating that firewall, we will configure that policy, right? For access policy. So I have just created a blank policy, right? So strict order rules should be ordered as you define first to last, right? So when the action will be drop all traffic or drop established traffic, drop all traffic, right? You want to enable that logs. Once I will enable that logs, then it will save on S3. So I don't want any tag on that. So that firewall is created. So as soon as that I will create that firewall, right? Automatically one endpoint will start automatically created on the backend. So I will go to that endpoint. No endpoint found. How it is possible? 1 second. This is taking time. Is Abhishek joined this call? Mm. Mm. Guys, last week somebody asked me one very good question, right? So I will ask you, I will explain you in today's practical. So let's suppose you have a multiple, because when we have to log into that Windows machine, right? So how we use with that key, we generate a password, and after that password, we logged in, right? But in our Linux instances, when we have to log in, right, we are not using passwords, right? So how I can log into my Linux instances with passwords, if I don't want to share a private key with every user? This is new, so I will explain, because somebody asked me. So that is generally used when we have our instances with connected to that domain controller, and now we want that it should not authenticate with the private key, it should connect with its own username and password, right? So that practical I will do today. The guy who asked me has not joined that call, so if he will see that video, then he will go through why it is not creating. Let's see if endpoint is created. Yes. So as soon as the firewall is created, right, the endpoint will automatically created. Firewall EP. This is what we want. So now what we will do, as firewall is created, right? So what we will do, go to that route table. So now we have to define the routing table, right? So in that routing table, what we will do, I will create for firewall route table. Where is my firewall route table? So in that firewall route table, what I will do, that in subnet association, I have added my firewall subnet. So in routes, what I will define, whenever that request will hit to my firewall subnet, where it should go to internet gateway, right? So if this is my design, right? So now in that firewall subnet, what I have defined, that whenever request will hit to that internet, right? 0.0.0, right? It should hit to IGW. So this one is clear. So now I have to define for my production app server, production app subnet, that whenever that request will hit, it should hit to my firewall, right? So how it will hit to firewall? Go to that firewall subnet. Sorry, my production application route table. In production application route table, that production subnet is already added. Click on route, edit route. So here I am not directly routing, because earlier what we were doing, whenever the request goes to internet, it was directly attaching to that IGW, right? So in earlier all our labs, what we were doing for any application server or customer subnet, right? We were directly routing that towards to IGW, right? But here in that case, what we will do here, we will route that traffic to network interface, right? And which network interface? So this is my network interface ID, ENI. One. Yes. So what was that ENI IP? That ENI IP was that endpoint IP of my firewall, right? As soon as I created a firewall, as I told you, as soon as that firewall was created, right? So firewall automatically created one endpoint, and that endpoint is used to connect to my customer subnet, so that they can send all the traffic to my firewall ENI. So once I created that firewall, right, automatically that endpoint is created for that firewall. So what I did, I selected that endpoint, and from that endpoint I find out what is this firewall network interface IP. So I selected that network interface IP, then I go to that route table, and in that production application route table, I send that whenever that request will hit, it will hit to my VPC endpoint, right? So this one is also clear. So now this all the application servers will send, whenever they have sent that request to internet, right? 0.0.0, right? They will send that request to my firewall endpoint, right? And firewall endpoint will inspect that traffic, and after inspecting that traffic, it will send to IGW, because now it has a route towards 0.0.0, right? So now,
One per year.
yes,
So that ANI, like firewall also has its own ANI, right?
yes, that ENI is a endpoint, right? Where all the traffic will reach, and that
Okay.
ENI will send that traffic to that firewall policies, which right now we have not created, right? So based upon that policies, it will inspect that traffic, and if it has to drop as per that policy, it will drop. And if it is allowed,
Yeah.
then based upon allow inspect, it will go to that route table, and route table will send that request to IGW.
Okay, actually, my query is that, like, in EC2 instance, when we create, there would be a default ENI. So in similar way, in this firewall, we have a default ANI of firewall only, or it's endpoint ANI?
This is
Both are different.
endpoint ENI. This is
Okay, okay.
this firewall is not deploying on the EC2 instance, right? So
Okay.
whenever we are deploying whenever we are launching EC2 instance, right? So what they are doing, they are giving one machine where we can deploy anything, right? So they
Right.
created one default ENI, right? After that, we are launching Palo Alto, Checkpoint, ASA, or any web proxy, whatever. But here we are using a SaaS solution,
Okay.
right? So when I'm saying SaaS, software as a security, here everything is deployed on the backend. So they are giving one endpoint, right? Because if it is on that EC2 instance, if it is launched on that EC2 instance, then it will be a PaaS solution, right? Because now they are providing a platform. We can also manage that backend platform. So we are not sure that when they are launching a firewall, whether they are launching on a Linux instance, whether they are launching on a Windows instance. So we are not aware about that. And second thing, it is not our responsibility that the backend platform needs to be properly secured with all the patchings, right? With all the updates, with all the reboots. So they will manage everything. So they are just providing that front end, right? So that is why this is a SaaS solution. So that is why they are not providing that ENI on the instance on which it is deployed. So they are automatically creating one endpoint so that we can route our traffic to that endpoint. I hope it is clear.
Yeah. Got it.
Sir,
Got it. Thank you.
One small
So
question.
Manpreet, Sandeep,
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
go ahead. So I just had quick question. Is this a specific feature of Amazon Firewall that when ENI is given, endpoint is automatically there
Sorry,
as a part
Sandeep.
of that
Okay.
solution?
Sorry, Sandeep, can you repeat again?
So is this a default feature of the Amazon Firewall since you selected Amazon Firewall? So is this a specific feature given with the Amazon Firewall that when you use with the ENI, endpoint is automatically there as a SaaS solution? You mentioned we are using this as a SaaS solution, software as a service.
Yes.
So is it specific feature to the Amazon Firewall only, or
Guys, is anyone else understand his question? Sorry, Sandeep. When I am
So his
deploying,
question is, when you create a firewall, is that only for AWS firewall the endpoint will be created? This is what his
yes,
question. If I
yes.
yeah? Okay.
Okay, so
And sir, there is one question from my side.
yes, sir, please ask.
Endpoint that's created. So what is the capacity of that particular NIC? I mean, for the bandwidth perspective. It will be
So
only for 1.5 Gbps or what?
So it will be a scalable, right? Because this is a SaaS solution. So as much as traffic you will send, right? So that interface scalability will be automatically increased. So it is elastic in nature. As soon as the traffic will increase, the bandwidth capacity of that interface will automatically increase. And as soon as the traffic will decrease, so it will automatically shrink to lower bandwidth.
Will it mitigate what is it?
So
That will
most of that SaaS services, right? They have a scalability and a elasticity feature, right? Based upon that requirement, they will increase its capacity, and as soon as the requirement will be decreased, they will shrink their capacity, right? You go for we will cover that AWS Shield, right? Similarly for any of and SaaS solution, right? SaaS solution means that it is a software as a service, so you do not need to worry about infrastructure or a platform. Okay, let's jump back to our scenario.
And this firewall can inspect only up to layer 4 or layer 7?
We have options where we can enable that IPS and IDS solutions for this firewall, right? And once we will enable that, there is one term that is called suricata rules, right? So that suricata rules explain that how we can enable that signatures for that firewall. So once, let me draw back that diagram, and then this was my VPC, right? This was my IGW, and IGW was connected with my firewall route table, and that firewall route table was connected with my production application servers, right? So here till now we have routed this traffic to that firewall endpoint, and that firewall traffic is now routing towards my IGW, right? So now let's go to IGW route table, right? So in that IG route table, right? So for that IG route table, I do not have any subnet for that IG route table, but it should be connected with my firewall, right? So to add that firewall to that IG route table, what I will do, I will go to that subnet association, not subnet association, for an edge association. I will go to edge association. I will select my firewall. And in IG route table, I will go to routes, edit routes. I will define what was my production application server subnet. It was 10.0.2.0/24, right? Whenever that request will hit to this subnet, it should go back to my firewall ENI. So that for that firewall ENI, I will go to my network interfaces, and in that network interfaces, I will select that ENI of my firewall endpoint. So I have saved it. So from connectivity perspective, I am good to go. So now let's go to that firewall where I have created that firewall. This is my firewall. So in that firewall, I have attached one blank policy, right? So that blank policy is a corporate access policy, right? So now let's configure that corporate access policy. I clicked on that, right? So here we have two options. One is stateful and one is stateless, right? So there is, I hope, no need to explain what is stateful and stateless, right? So now nobody is using that stateless, right? Because if I will create that stateless policy, then I have to create both inbound and outbound. So I will go with that stateful rules group. Currently, nothing is created in that stateful rule group. So let's go and create that stateful rule group. Standard stateful. So this is what, right? So if I will go with that standard stateful rule, so this rules will configure based upon that source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, right? For which protocol, TCP, UDP, ICMP, right? Similarly, if I will go with that domain list, right, then I can mention that what domains are allowed, what domains are restricted. Similarly, this is signature-based suricast compatible rule strings, right? So this is if you want to enable IPS IDS features or layer 7 inspections. So let's go with that basic default standful. So this is my block policy. So in capacity, that capacity means that at a time, how many number of rules can be inspect that traffic. So let's suppose I will go with, guys, please mute. So capacity, I have set 3, right? So now this is a stateful inspection. With that stateful inspection, let's suppose I want to, this is my block policy, right? So go to that IP from any source with any source port to, let's suppose I will go with any destination, right? What I will do, I will create one of the instance, and then we will initially block that traffic, right? So let's suppose go with any destination IP with custom ports. We will block port 22 and port 80. I selected that it should be drop. As soon as I select, I have to add that rule. So this is a first rule. Similarly, from another, I can create another rule from what source to what destination for what port it should allow or block, right? Again, it will, guys, again, otherwise I have to mute everyone, right? Then you guys will not able to raise your query. So please mute.
Suman, can you mute? Manpreet, just mute Suman.
Yeah, so now I hope I am audible to you guys, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So guys, this is just like a normal firewall policies which we configured, right? So this is a first policy. After that, you can configure from another source to another destination for another port. So it will work like top to bottom, right? So I have created, let's suppose, only drop one, create next, create rule group. Okay, so this block policy is now attached for my corporate access policy, right? So now let's do one thing. Go to that instance. Launch instance. Test machine. I don't want. Right, on the firewall, we have blocked SSH, but here on this EC2 instance, I am allowing that SSH. So let's see if my firewall is blocking it or not. So I launched that. Why you are not showing them? Okay, so this is my test machine. Running. So now let's connect. But here I am able to connect, so that means something is wrong. What is wrong? Go to my firewall group. In that firewall group, my block policy. That block policy is defining that any source to any destination on port 22 and port 80 action should be drop. But I am here able to connect. So, okay. 1 second. This EC2
Getting a different IP, right? Can you go back to the EC2 instance tab?
1 second, Naresh.
Yes.
Go to this. I go to that route table. Yeah, I got it. So what I did, yeah, Naresh, you tell me what I did wrong.
On the third tab, the EC2.
I'm on the EC2. Yes.
You are getting the private IP 172.31.
Good. So basically, when I launched that, right, I have not selected my VPC, right? I launched it on the default VPC, so that is why it is not sending that traffic to my firewall. So let's terminate this machine. Good one, Naresh.
Manpreet, how we can change here actually in running instance? Either
No,
zone or
I can't change VPC, right? Yeah. So now I'm launching a new. I terminated this, so I'm launching a new instance.
so we don't have any option in like instance level that we can't change once it is launched.
No. Right. So now go to this test EC2 test prod EC2. I'm selecting here. I don't want, I selected edit settings. In edit settings here, I missed that, right? So I am now selecting a production VPC, right? Production VPC, I am launching this in my production application subnet, right? And public IP I want, because I have to connect. So by default, SSH is allowed. Let's wait for it to launch. Okay. Okay, so now you see I am not able to connect to this EC2 instance. It is trying to connect on port SSH 22, right? And I am not able to connect. Why I am not able to connect? Because now when through that IGW, when I'm trying to connect to this production application instance, right? My firewall is blocking that traffic for port 22. So now let's go back to our firewall. Here is my firewall. Block policy. Edit. Let's pass. So now what I did, I created, I modified that rule from drop to pass. Otherwise, what else I can do? Because now this, what other option, what I can do is that I will go with that default option, that any to any the traffic is drop, but now I know the IP of my public instance, right? So this is the IP address of my public instance. So I will create another rule, right? That rule will be from any source to that specific destination IP, right? I will add that rule, and after adding that rule, I will move up that rule for my custom IP access. Then it can also work. So let's save this group, and now this firewall will allow port 22 traffic. So now let's go back. Yes, so now on the firewall side, the request is allowed. So I am now able to connect to that firewall. So this is the way we can use AWS firewall to restrict that. So, right, so the main purpose of using that AWS firewall is, one second, let me explain you. So when we say we are using Palo Alto, right, firewalls. So in interview, right, if somebody will ask you that if we have a AWS firewalls, then why, or let's suppose in next week when we will cover web application firewalls, right? So when AWS is providing these AWS firewalls or a web application firewalls, then why we deploy our own third-party firewalls in the cloud environment? So anyone wants to give any answer? Anyone?
So because in the
Compliance
entire
issue.
environment, they will be using the specific firewall, so it will be easy to manage in centrally.
Yes, to centralized policy. Good. Yeah, because if I'm using a checkpoint management server, right, and I have attached all the firewalls, so through that single management, I can push that policies, right, and I can centrally manage that pre-post policies. What are the basic pre-policies which I need, right? I can push to all the firewalls. So one point was a centralized policy, and second was, yes, anyone else? First point is correct from interview perspective. We are using third-party firewall deployment in the cloud to manage that centralized policies in our environment. So one is correct. What is that second answer? Sir, guess to karo.
There should be a security approach. Let's suppose one of the hacker get the knowledge about the AWS breach. Okay, he has everything. So we could have the different layer approach for the security.
No, Naresh. So here you are doubting on the AWS security tools or security controls.
Yes, correct, man.
Yeah, so I think somebody told earlier that second is compliances, right? In terms of compliances, right? So whenever we follow a piece, especially if we are a financial organization, right, where we don't want that our traffic should be inspected by AWS firewall, right? We want our own firewall which inspect that traffic. So for that, we use a third-party firewall, right? So this is the reason we use AWS firewall. Other than that, let's suppose if this is my VPC, right? What I will do, I will create one here. I will deploy one Palo Alto firewall, right? It's up to you based upon your design. You can attach with that GTM, and that GTM will attach with your endpoint, and your endpoint will attach with that IGW, right? So whatever the request will hit to GTM, Palo Alto will inspect, send back to this, and this is my north south. Or similarly, if I have a this firewall and a this firewall, this VPC, right? So they all are connected to my TGW, and TGW is sending that request to my security VPC, right? And security VPC sends that request to Palo Alto. Palo Alto inspect that and send back to this VPC. So this is one way, right? Other than that, right, let's suppose here I have a firewall, but let's suppose I have another VPC, right? And I don't want that every traffic which needs to go to secure VPCs, right? So let's suppose this is my public VPC. This is my public VPC. Some of the devices have its own public IP or load balancer, which I want it should be inspected through that Palo Alto firewall. Then I will use this Palo Alto firewall. But if this is my secure VPC, this is my secure VPC. And in these secure VPCs, I have some EC2 instances, some applications, right? Or some of the database, anything like that. And I want that, I know that these are secure and nobody can access from externally, or they should not go to internet, right? And they just want to communicate internally. So for that solutions, what I can do, I will build one AWS firewall in this VPC, one AWS firewall in this VPC, so that as a source only this VPC IP to this destination, and similarly when they have to connect, only this source VPC IP to this source destination VPC can be communicated. So for internal or a secure communication, when we are sure that our services will not go to internet, or any of the internet traffic will not go to this VPC, for that we can use a AWS VPC, AWS firewall, right? Other than that, when we are saying that any of the traffic communication will go to internet, or from internet to my cloud VPC, right? And that scenarios, generally organizations use a third-party firewalls, even though that AWS firewalls can also used for that internet manage internet traffic. But as I said, that to manage that centralized internet inspection policies all over the organizations, we generally use that third-party firewalls, because these are generally centralized, connected with any of my Panorama or management server, centralized server. Through that we can manage. Other than that, we can also fulfill our compliance requirements, right? So this, okay, so guys, I have one more question. So now I am connecting to this EC2 instance, right? So let's suppose I am now not able to connect to this EC2 instance. So what is the other option, right? Everything is fine, but I'm not sure that what is wrong with this EC2 instance or this application. So what is the other way I can connect to this EC2 instance? Right, so this was my EC2 instance, right? And this is my public IP, and over the public IP, I am now connected to this EC2 instance. Although my firewall, let's suppose I have tested everything, my firewall policy is okay, firewall is allowing that traffic, but still I am not able to connect to this EC2 instance, right? So to troubleshoot that perspective, or what is that other alternate way so that I can reach to this EC2 instance and identify that everything is fine on my application? We covered that in previous class.
So Manpreet, I think session manager option is there, right?
So what was the benefit of that session manager? How? Okay, so now let's suppose this is my EC2 instance. I go to connect, right? I clicked on session manager. It is not giving me an option to connect to that session manager, right? So how I can connect to that session manager?
For that SSM agent, we need to install.
SSM agent we need to install on the. Hello.
So yes, you are right. So if let's suppose he says in interview, somebody will again ask you next question that, okay, so this you connected through that session manager to that EC2 instance, and after connecting to that EC2 instance, you see because when we, as you know, that when we connect through that session manager to that EC2 instance, right? So we connected with that CLI, right?
Right.
If I'm on a Linux side, so I will connect to that bash kernel. So if I'm connecting through that session manager to Windows, then I will connect to that PowerShell, right? So through I have landed to that instance, I see that everything in terms of process perspective is running, right? But I am not able to see from a GUI perspective that what is the current state of my application, right? Or what is the error on my GUI? So what is the other way I can connect? From interview perspective, you give me right answer that if I am not able to launch my firewall policies correct, so I will go to that session manager, and through that session manager, I will able to connect. He will say that, okay, if you are not getting that option through session manager, so what could be the issue? That definitely that SSM agent is not installed on that, or SSM agent is not running on that. So this is one way. So if he says that, okay, so SSM agent is not running, so what you will do? Yes, sir.
Not running, then we will go to the IAM role, and there is an option, permission option, right?
Good. You are giving good answers. Yes. What else? I just want to recall so that in interview, if somebody will confuse you. Yeah. Meanwhile, tell me, anyone else?
Yeah, fleet option.
Very good. Who replied that?
Yeah, Harsh here.
Harsh, very good. So, session manager, right? In that session manager, there is an option of fleet manager, right? With that fleet manager, I can see this is just like a console, right? So right now we have not enabled that SSM agent. So last time when we show you, right? So with that session manager, we can connect to our instances through the backend, through CLI, right? Similarly, with that fleet manager, we will see that console, that what exactly the status currently showing on the screen level, right? Other than that, if let's suppose you have to push any common command, or let's suppose you want to you find out that one of the patches stuck on all the EC2 instances, right? So you can go to that session manager run command, and you can run that common command on all the EC2 instances on that VPC, right? So that session manager is basically used for a troubleshooting perspective as well as for a patching perspective. Okay, so there is one other query. Let's suppose I'm now connecting to this EC2 instance, right? So can I use that EC2 serial console in not because right now we are using a free tier account, right? So we are not using that EC2 serial console. So from exams perspective, always tell that this whenever we have to connect to that EC2 options, right? So we have one option is through that PuTTY, right? We can connect, or through that Windows RDP client we can connect. If it is not working through that console, we can use EC2 instance connect. And if through that EC2 instance connect it is not working, I will check my firewall, I will check my security group, and if both are allowed and still it is not working, I will go to that session manager, right? And through session manager, I will launch to that instance CLI and will confirm that. And if I want that application GUI status, then I will go to that session manager and will see from that fleet manager. Other than that, there is an option of EC2 serial console. So I will go and connect through that serial console. So when you will go to that enterprise account, with that enterprise account, this option will be also enabled. So other than that, there is one more thing. Let me explain you. This is my instance. Go to action, monitoring, troubleshooting, right? So this is EC2 serial console, right? This is my free tier account, so I cannot connect through that serial console. So this is an instance screenshot. So this is an instance screenshot, right? So this screenshot is only telling me that this is the current status, right? But now if I want to connect to this, right, so I cannot connect because this is a screenshot. This is showing me that this is the option. The other option is that either I have to again connect through that EC2 serial console if I am using a business account, enterprise account, or other than that, previous option which we covered last week, that is a fleet manager, right? Okay, so now next topic which we want to cover is called a secret manager.
Manpreet, so I have a query in the firewall.
Yes.
Please go to the firewall once. AWS firewall.
Go to VPC.
Yeah. So, like, how to validate here that whether it is hitting to this firewall while we are trying to assess.
So for that, so for that, whenever we are creating a firewall, right? So we can enable the logging on S3 bucket. So let's suppose this is my test firewall.
So without that, we can't see like whether it's hitting or not, which policy it is hitting. Like in normal firewall, we see which rule it is hitting.
So for that, what you have to do, first of all, you have to deploy, you have to select on which S3 bucket you have to select the logs, and then whatever the SIM tool you are using, right? So you have to connect that SIM tool logs to that S3 bucket logs. So let's suppose I'm just taking any of the example. Other than that, there is one more option. I will ask you guys first, right? So create policy, right? So here log an alert message for all the packets, log and alert established message packets that are established connection, right? So I will select it here, go to select. Test policy, right? So once you will enable that, right, so it will automatically create a bucket and it will show you. Other than that, there is one option we discussed. VPC reachability analyzer, right? So guys, whenever you will stuck anywhere, right, in terms of troubleshooting, as I told you, even in the interview, right, if somebody will say that everything is working and still it is not working, everything in configuration perspective is working, right, then what you will do, right? So this is that reachability analyzer, right, which we already covered. We will go to path, we will select that from which source type, from which instance, right? So source instance, this is my destination. Let's suppose I will select IP address. I will select what is the IP address, 4.2.2.2, right? So TCP or UDP. Let's suppose ping, whatever you want to select, right? I will create an analyze path, and once I will run that script, right, it will show me it is launching. So through that we can troubleshoot that. So these are the two options. I will also explain you the other inspection features, that is CloudWatch and CloudTrail, right? So we covered multiple times that whenever we have to monitor anything on the EC2 instances, right? So this is a monitoring status, right? How we can integrate that CloudWatch, these logs with the CloudWatch, right? So there is one term CloudWatch we have covered already. Let me explain you.
Sir, I have a question regarding that EC2 instance screenshot. I mean,
Yes, sir.
okay, so let's suppose there are the list of users currently logged on the EC2 instance with the different username. So while we going to take the screenshot, so which user will be selected by the AWS?
Okay, so when you are saying it is generally showing that current screen on the EC2 instance, right? So like when you are taking a console, right? So it is just like a screenshot is just like a console. So let's suppose multiple machines, multiple users are currently logged into that EC2 instance. So when you are taking a console, so in that console, it will only show you that what is the current screen status, right? So that screen status will show that what are the current status of that application is running.
It's quite confusing in the EC2
One
level.
second, let me explain you.
I mean, I hope you got my point.
I got your point. So I am just giving you one example. You will understand from that example, right? So let's suppose this is your firewall, right? So let's suppose on this EC2, this is your firewall. So multiple users are logged in. So when you connect to your firewall through that console, right? So what screen you see?
On the console level, we could see the what is the current state of that? I mean, if there any reboot is going on, is there any processes still running? Is there any
So
critical logs available?
so that console is generally used for two things, right? Let's suppose you have rebooted that firewall. Until that GUI page will not come, right? So you will not see that what is the backend processing running on that, right? So for that purpose, we are using a GUI. Similarly, from a login perspective, let's suppose 2 or 3 users are logged in, right? So when this EC2 console, through that console or through that screenshot you will connect, right? So that console will connect to the front page of that console. Through that you are connected, because when you are connecting, you are giving permission to any user, right? Similarly, when you're connecting through that console, you are logging with that admin or through that PAM account, right? Through that PAM account. So when you will connect to through console, it will give me that console error. Similarly, console option to connect. Similarly, when I'm going to see a screenshot, right? In that screenshot, what process is running, or let's suppose currently nobody is logged in, so it will give me that page.
Okay, got it.
Manpreet, one more query, please.
Yeah.
Please open the route table once of intent gateway.
Okay, guys. So 1 second, I will jump to that route table. So we will also cover this CloudWatch and CloudTrail, because these are also very helpful in terms of monitoring that log, as you said, in firewall perspective as well. Guys, now let's jump to another topic as well. Yeah. You want to see that route table?
Yeah, in route table where you associated that endpoint, endpoint association, something that was I want to see.
For which route table you want to see?
Moment. Yeah, internet route table, IGW route table. I think there you assigned that edge association here.
Edge association,
Yeah.
yes. So in that internet route table, right? So generally, when this is my reverse route, right? So when we created a topology, right? So for that production route table, I have a subnet. For firewall route table, I have a subnet. But for that internet gateway, right? For internet gateway, we are not launching that internet gateway to any of the route table, right? So for that to connect to this IGW route table, right? we go to that edge associations. In that edge associations, I selected my production IGW.
What is that production IGWT? Like this is internet gate only, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And in subnet association, what we assign anything?
So
in subnet?
there is no subnet for
No
that
subnet.
IGW, right? So there is no, only you need to remember is that if I will not add that reverse route for that subnet, right, then it will not work. Let me give you one more complex design. Guys, I will discuss only last design for this scenario, right? Then we will jump to our next topic. So let's suppose this is my VPC. This is my prod VPC. Subnet is 10.0.0.0/16, right? So this is my first project. Let's suppose this is my project 1, right? Or application servers subnet. Similarly, I have one more project. This is my project 2. What I will do, I will create one firewall for this availability zone, right? One firewall for this availability zone. This will connect to my IGW. This will connect to my IGW, and this will connect to this firewall subnet, this subnet. So for this route table, 0.0.0 should go to firewall EP, firewall endpoint, right? And this firewall endpoint route towards IGW, 0.0.0 towards IGW. Similarly, for this firewall, when I will launch this, it will 0.0 to this firewall endpoint, and this firewall will route to IGW. Similarly, you can create, right? So setup remains same. The only thing you need to remember is that the number of projects you will launch in that VPC, you have to remember that you have to add another route, right? So if this is my route table, right, here I have to launch 10.0.3.0/24, one more subnet. So you, in that route table, you have to just add the reverse subnet for the new project or the new availability zone which you are launching. Other than that, the rest of the routing concept will remain same. Okay. So now let's cover 2 more topics, and then end of the class, if you have any other queries, we will cover that, right? So now next topic which I want to cover is a secret manager. Right. So in that secret manager again, right? So earlier, whenever we were launching any application, right? So, or you can say whenever we are connecting to our databases, right? So you guys, you know what is PAM? Have you got the chance? What is password access management tools? Did you have any experience, anyone, on the password access management tools?
So Manpreet, we use PAM. In PAM, we store the passwords, right? Admin
So-
password credentials.
So which tool you are using for PAM?
Currently they are Selenia, I think they are using.
Okay, so anyone who has experience on a HashiCorp?
Yes, we are using KeyPass.
Okay, that KeyPass is I
KeyPass,
think
we store the
client.
password, right?
Yeah, that is a client. Okay, so
in PAM, mostly we have all the jump servers. From there, we connect to the jump servers, right?
so okay, so what is the benefit of using secret manager, right? So let's suppose this is my EC2 instance. Let's suppose we will take example of database, right? So if this is my database, right, and I want this this application, and this application should connect to my database, right? Because there is a 2 option, right? Either I will add that username and password in my code, right? And then through that code, when it will request to this database, right, it will use that code, username and password for authentication for a database. Similarly, for this application, it will also connect. So let's suppose I have a e-commerce website, right? E-commerce website is using in currently 60 countries, right? So if let's suppose I have upgraded that database, or I have built a new database and now the password is changed, right? So that means that I have to change the password in all my applications in all the regions, if it is using in UAT environment or a dev environment or anywhere, right? I have to change everywhere, right? So in case if I will miss to change password in any of the application or in any of the instance, then it will create an outage. To cover that, we are using Secret Manager. This is one option. Second advantage of Secret Manager is that now, as I am using a Secret Manager, right? So I do not need to define the username and a password in my hard-coded application codes, right? I will just use a variables, right? So this is code string. So let's suppose username, right? So I will simply say is that username $password, and I will allow this EC2 instance to connect to my database, right? So it will automatically pick that password from here, use that password from that Secret Manager. It will perform its process or query, and again it will stop. Whenever it has to run, it will automatically pick that password from a Secret Manager. Here is a Secret Manager. It will pick a password from a Secret Manager. It will use that in that query, connect to that database, complete that process, and again stop that process. Next time after a cron or after a schedule, right, it has to again run that. It will again go to that Secret Manager. Through that Secret Manager, it will pick that, right? So with that Secret Manager, I do not need to store a code in my application code. So that means that I do not need to share that code with my application developers. So if I'm not sharing that code, a password with that, not code, that password with my application developer. So that means that even though if my code is breached, right, or if any malicious user will access my code, they will not able to get my username and password of my database. Other option is that Secret Manager is also having an option of rotational password rotational policy, right? So with that password rotational policy, let's suppose after, if this is a very critical application, right, then, and let's suppose I said that after every 4 hours my password will change, right? So once that password will change, right, I do not need to go to every application and change that password for that database. So again, after 4 hours, a new developer is trying to connect or he comes in the shift, and if somebody, let's suppose in the previous shift, used that password and then saved in that text, and if he is trying to use that same password, it will not work because that password is automatically changed by that Secret Manager, right? So now let's go to theory part, and then we will jump to the practical. So that Secret Manager is mostly used for our critical databases, right, where we want to store that password in a Secret Manager. So the applications which wants to connect to that database use that Secret Manager, because every application which has to connect to that database needs authentication on the database side. So if you don't want to share that username and password, right, with your application developers, or you don't want to store that hard-coded passwords in your application codes, then we use a Secret Manager. Other than that Secret Manager, as I told, also helps to manage that security compliance for that password rotation. And third thing is that if any critical information, passwords you want to store, right, then we can use a secret manager, and only the admins of that region can have access of secret manager, so that they can retrieve that password and they can share that. And whenever they will change manually, it will automatically change on all your applications, right? So this tool is mostly used, as I said, for developers and for that database administrators, but you should know that, right? So in DevSecOps, generally, when we perform a static application testings, right, we ensure that there is no hard code access key or a password stored in our end code, right? So if they are saying that we do not have any options, we are not using any PAM tool, right, then you says that use that secret manager service on the AWS side. So what is the challenge? In many organizations, secrets are hard coded directly as a part of application. And if you want to rotate the secret credentials, all your application servers needs to be updated. And if you miss anyone, the production can be down, right? So for that, we are using, I got this diagram. So here you just change AWS Secret Manager. So this is very common and very good tool, HashiCorp, right? Which is used as a PAM to save your passwords, to save your secrets, and it connects with almost all the third-party applications and the devices. Through that we can, because it has an option to connect to Cisco, Palo Alto checkpoint. So I thought that you might guys using that, right? So with that HashiCorp, so Secret Manager is a practice that allows developers to securely store sensitive data such as passwords, keys, tokens in secure environment with the strict access controls, right? So this is the way. So let's suppose if EC2 instance has to connect to that database, first it will send that request to that HashiCorp, right? HashiCorp will give that username and password, right? But even though if it is giving that username and password to that access, but developer who is using that still don't know that what is that username and password. That HashiCorp or that AWS Secret Manager will insert that username and password in that connection request. And once that connection is established, right, then in all that sessions, it will use that application to database column and rows to connect to fetch all the data. So I think we are again covering that same things. AWS Secret Manager helps you to manage, retrieve, and rotate your database credentials, APIs, and the other secrets through their life cycle. Rotates secrets, rotation periodically, that we know, right? AWS Lambda functions, that is again on the DevOps side, where we can use our codes to change that secret. So whatever the policy we are using. So now let's go to that practical. Let's terminate this instance first. Okay. I am launching store a new secret. Right. So if you want to store that password of your relational database, your document database, your Redshift, right? Or if you are using any third-party database, or if you have any API key or any code, right, which you want to store, so you can directly store. So let's suppose I will go with this application. Test RDS. test. Let's use this one. The data will be encrypted here. Okay, so I'm using a database. So now let's go with this API. I will, right? So username, admin, password, admin 123, right? So you want to encrypt. Now, this is for my lab API server. Do you want a automatic rotation? So let's suppose if I will enable that rotation. So if you want to rotate that, right? So you can select that after how many hours, after how many days, after how many weeks, or after how many months it will rotate, right? So let's suppose I will go this for after every 4 hours. No lambda function is created. So for which API, let's suppose I am creating my lambda function for that API. So let's suppose that is that basically for which code you are using. Let's suppose I am using this for a Python one, right? I created that. Okay. Right. So now you see, as soon as that secret is now created, right? So it is giving me that, okay, so this is the string which I need to add in my code, right? So if I'm using a Java code or a JSON script or a C, right? So this is a string, right? Or if I'm using a Python, if I'm Ruby, or if any Go, right? So this is the, when we are creating a code, right? So in that code, there is a one function, and in that function we have a multiple sub functions. So this is one of the sub function which you need to mention, in your main function, so that it connects to that secret manager, and from that secret manager it stores that, right? So let's go. I have not defined that code. So let's suppose this code is stored, right? And as an administrator, if you want to share that code, so go to that secret manager, select for which API servers you want to use, right? Go here, retrieve secret value, and this is the username and password, right? This is one very common example. Let's suppose I have to store a common username and password of my administrator or my firewall, right? So I can use that a secret manager, right? Although it will not rotate a Palo Alto firewalls after every 4 hours or after 1 month, right? But let's suppose I don't want to share my super user or a admin username password. So what I can do, I can store it on the AWS Secret Manager. And for that AWS Secret Manager, only the administrators of that region can have access. So if you want that admin password, you have to raise a PAM request. They will approve that, and then only they will retrieve that password from here. So now let's go and do one thing. Let's launch one RDS. I'm create standard creation, MySQL. I'm launching in a free tier. I'm launching here database. Right. So earlier you see, right here, I was using master name, this, auto generate. ADMIN 1, 2, 3. So I have created my database. So now let's go to that instance. Launch one instance. Application server. I will launch in my default VPC. I want a public IP on that. Okay, so my database is still creating. So what I will do, I have launched this application server. This application server will connect to my database. So for that database, what is the database port? Sir, I have allowed SSH and the database port for this one. Similarly, for my database, let's see what is the security group. If this security group is allowing port 3306. Save it. I've allowed all the traffic. You may not. One second. C306. Okay, so on the database side, I have also allowed this communication for port 3306. Similarly, for my EC2 instance, I have allowed it. Let's see if my okay, it is still creating. So meanwhile, what I can do, go to IAM. RDS. I'm creating one user on the IAM side. I want to create IAM user. Password will be admin123. Yes. So guys, how I can change my password policies? Anyone knows? Because now it is saying that I have to use a complex password. I have to use a minimum 8 characters. So if let's suppose my organization has a requirement that minimum 12 characters, so how I can change that? Anyone? No? Yes, no?
I think you showed before. We have to go
Yes,
and select the password something.
no, that
But-
I showed. That is why I'm asking that if you guys remember. I have created a secret manager policy permission to this user. Let me explain. Okay. So guys, now you guys tell me, right? I have created one username. This is my username and password. Let me save it somewhere. I have to access, I have to also access its access key and secret access key. So how I can see that? Because after creating that access username and password, it is not giving me that access key and secret access key. So how I can get that?
You're telling about retrieving the password?
Yeah, generally when we create a username and password, right? It every time gives me access keys and secret access keys. When now I'm created a username, it is not giving me access key and secret access key. So how I can now access that access key and secret access key? Because now I have to connect to EC2 instance with that access key and secret access key. So how I can fetch that? Sir, यार ऐसे मत किया करो please. That means that you guys are not performing a labs. Harsh, Deepak, Mayank, Naresh, Ravi, Shankar, Sonu. Guys. So now when we created a user, right? So after creating to that user, right? Select that user, go to that security credentials. In that security credentials, I told, right? Here is that access key options. Create access key, right? You want for that CLI one? Yes. Next. Create access key. So this is my access key. And this is my secret key. So this is my access key. This is my secret access key, right? As I said that if it is compromised, don't go and directly delete it. Here, from here, you can deactivate it, right? After deactivate it, right? Confirm that if everything is working, then create a new access key, right? After creating that, delete that previous one. So now I have an access key. I have a secret access key. Now what I have to do, I again go to that EC2 instance. This is my running EC2 instance. EC2 connect. Sudo super user. I switch to that super user. Right, and I have to install MySQL agent. Maya DB. Okay. 1 second. How to install a so this is the command to install MSQL agent on my EC2 instance. So go back to this. It's MariaDB 105. So I installed that agent. That is already installed. Okay, so now what I will do, I will go AWS configure. What is the access key of that user? Because now this user has a permission to connect to that secret manager, right? Because when I created this user, I gave that permission to that secret manager. So let's copy that, paste it here. Region default and format is JSON. Okay. So if I have to connect to my now username and password, so how I can connect? My SQL -h is the IP address of my database. This is my endpoint. Then -u, its username was admin -p, password was admin123, and then it was port 3306. Why it is showing this unknown database MySQL-H.
Username is RDS admin.
Are you sure? Something is wrong. Endpoint name is correct from a security group perspective.
I think that role we have not assigned to use EC2.
No, now I am logged in with that user, right? So who has a permission to connect? -H database.
Password admin at 123.
1 second. Let's remove the
Admin
password.
@123.
Yes. Yeah, so password was admin @123, right? So I was using that admin 123, right?
Correct,
So right. So here is a challenge, right? Because now when let's suppose I have a multiple developers, right? So they are building the application, right? So when they have to connect to the database to fetch any of the information from the database, right? I have to provide a username and password. So if I am providing that username and password, so that means that this is okay till let's suppose for one of a known machine through which they are using. So let's suppose they build one virtual machine on same server, and from that if they will do any malicious access to my database, because now they have a username and password, right? So in such scenarios, if I don't want to share a username and password, so for that I will use a secret manager, right? So how we will use that? 1 second, let's see. Yeah, database is connected, right? So for that, now I am now connected with the user. Right. So now I have given a permission to this EC2 instance for the user who has an access key and secret access key. So what was that user? That user is RDS admin, right? And this RDS user has a permissions. What permissions they have? Secret manager permission. So in that secret manager permissions, this access key is allowing users to connect to that secret manager, to that EC2 instance, to that RDS instance, KMS, right? So that means that this EC2 instance, which is now logged in with this access key and secret access key, can directly go to that secret manager, right? So now let's see in that secret access manager. I have copied one script here for JSON. Okay. Here is my secret manager. Ah. RDS. I missed what was the username on this. Okay, so the username is admin and password is admin123. Okay. I go to that secret manager, username is admin, password is admin123. So for this database, I added this for my prod RDS. Click down next. I currently will not go with that rotation policy. Store. My prod RDS. Yes. So basically now what I did, right? So in that secret manager, I have added my RDS database, right? That secret manager name is this my prod RDS, right? So if you have admin rights on the cloud or you are a cloud administrator, you go to that secret manager, select your secret details for your database. From here, you can retrieve that. Okay, so this information is for username this, password this, my engine is this, SQL engine I'm using, this is the host name, this is the post, and this is the database extension. So it fetch all the details for that database. So now based upon your application code, whatever the information you want, right? So this is the sub code, right? So you just need to create that public static void. So this is the details you want to use, right? So now I use this information. So now let's see, because now my user has a permission to connect to that secret manager. So that secret manager is now have a connectivity with my database, for instance, for this to fetch, right? So now let's confirm 1 second if it is working. Okay, right. So that echo secret has permissions to connect. That is fine. One second. Guys, this is some coding. So I am not creating any main code here, right? So I am just adding that sub functions directly here so that I can show you that how exactly we are using. Okay, right. So as a code developer, right? So what I will do, I will just add this command, secret AWS secret manager get secret value for this secret ID. The secret string will be in a JSON format, right? I am And here when I will say is that user, so for that user, it will go to my secret manager, right? And it will fetch its username. When I will say a password, for that password, it will go to my secret string and will fetch that password. Similarly, when I will type a endpoint, right, it will fetch that endpoint value from a secret where the value of host is mentioned. Similarly, for a port wise, right? So now in my application code, right, if developer has to connect, so how developer will use for a connectivity, it will use MySQL -h, right? So earlier I was using this command, right? Earlier I was using this command. So right, so earlier I was using this command where I was giving a developer my username and password, right? But now I have configured a secret manager configuration with that permissions. So now as a developer in my code, what I will do, I will use MySQL -h, right? Then I will not given my database server name, right? I will simply say that whenever you have to use, right? So just mention that endpoint. Sorry. Just mention endpoint. You want to connect to the endpoint, right? So secret manager will automatically tell you that for which endpoint you have to connect. I will not give a username. So if you want to connect, just mention you need a user, right? Similarly, for a password one, just go with -p, then I will say use that port, then the last was -p, then it will be a password. Right. So now see, as a developer, I will say that only use this information in your code, right? Earlier, when I was not using AWS Secret Manager, right, I was using this command in my code to connect to my database, right? So I was giving my host ID, I was giving port number, I was giving a admin username. Similarly, manually he has to put a password. Otherwise, if after P, if I will put my password, it will work. But if I will use a secret manager, right, in that secret manager string in my code, I will only store this information: MySQL -h -endpoint -u -p password port. So in that, even if my code will compromise, right, hacker will not know that what is my database name, what is my username, what is my port, or what is my password. I just use this string. So this strings fetch that information from a secret manager. So this is my secret manager, right? And for this secret manager connectivity, I have given a permission to this user, right? So this user has a permission to connect to that secret manager. So after giving a permission, that they are able to connect to that secret manager, and in that secret manager, I have create a string for that, right? So from that strings, they fetch all the information, and after fetching that information, they are now connecting to this. So this is the main purpose of using that secret manager. So with that secret manager, so again, I'm telling, with that secret manager, there is no need to store a username or a password in any of your application. Or so, and another thing is that we have a rotational policy with that. So let's suppose now if I will change that password, right? So if I will change that password, I do not need to go to my code and change the password in every sub function, right? So wherever I am using this application, because it will again try to connect to my secret manager, and on that secret manager, if I have changed that password, so I can fetch that. Other than that, right, as a PAM, if I have an admin rights and somebody asks me to provide me a admin username and password, right? So as a PAM tool, right, I will store my admin or super usernames passwords here, and only I have a permissions to fetch that. So based upon that, I will go to that string, From here, I will retrieve that information, right? So this is the another purpose we are using a secret manager. So till now, if you have any query, ask me. Yes, sir. Yes, no. Guys, reply at least.
No, not as of now. We need to
Okay.
review it once again.
All right. Okay. So one last thing I will cover, right? Somebody asked me last week. So if let's suppose this is my EC2 instance, he actually asked me two things. Where is this? One second. This is my EC2 instance, right? So right now I am not using any key pair for this one. So I am not using any key pair, right? So there is no key pair, so I cannot use its private key to connect to through a putty, right? And now let's suppose this Linux, right, is now connected to the domain controller and you want to connect with the username password, or let's suppose you have created this is one vendor, right? So for vendor, you have created a jump server and you don't want to give your private key to connect to that jump server, and you want that vendor just log into this EC2 instance with the username and password, right? So how it will connect? So for that, like in Windows, we have an option to log in with the username and password, even though we have a private key. From that private key, we generate a password and we use a username and a password. But for that Linux ones, right, whenever we have to launch, we have to use a putty. In that putty, through SSH, we are importing that private key, right? But here, let's suppose I don't want to give that private key to my any client or a vendor to log into that jump server, and I want that they logged in with EC2, right? So for that, what you have to do? So you simply first you need to enable the password authentication. By default, on all the Linux instances, the password authentication is disabled, right? So sudo super user, I logged into that super user, right? And after now sudo, then I want to change the password of this EC2 hyphen user. Okay, let me explain you one more thing. Right, so this is the public IP of this instance. It is saying yes, access EC2 hyphen user, right? So now you see when I'm trying to log in, right, it is saying that authentication is not enabled, right? So I can only logged in with the private key because the public key is stored on this EC2 instance. So it will validate my private key. So once that public private key combination of asymmetric algorithm work, authenticate, then only it will allow me to log in. It's not like a Windows where we can just put a username and password. So in that scenario, what I will do, first of all, I will change a password, then I will enable the authentication. So password, let's suppose I will type admin123. So now what I need to do in Linux, we have cd space etc/etc/ssh. So SSH config. So to read any file, we can use cat, right? So cat command is used to read that file? No. sshd_config, right? So this is giving me a read. So here I have to see that where I need to enable the authentication. So here you see we have enabled that public key authentication, right? So that public key authentication is currently enabled. So what I want to enable that user authentication. So for that user authentication, yeah. So currently that password authentication is no. So I need to change it to yes. PI, then VI is editing tool. So in editing tool, I will go and I will change it to let me go through if it is saved. My password authentication is now yes. So now let's see. EC2 hyphen user. Okay, still it is not working. Let me restart the service. Sudo service SSD. Right. So this is the way. So if you want a jump server to any of your client, right, that okay, so log into this jump server, and from that jump server we will only give a permission to their software or a vendor which he wants to access for a troubleshooting perspective, right? If you don't want to provide your private key, because with that private key, right, if I'm using that private key in multiple EC2 instances, and now I have to give a permission to any of my vendor to log into that jump server and troubleshoot their application issue. So for Windows one, we know that we can authenticate with the username and passwords. For that Linux one, if that vendor wants to log in through that jump server, then you have to manually enable that SSH authentication on the Linux machine. So to enable that SSH authentication, what I did, I logged into that jump server, right? After logging to that jump server, I switched to that super user. That sudo super user command, with that super user, I logged into that, right? And to change a password, right? Password. Let's suppose if I have any user, right? So let's suppose my user is exists. So I will say admin, password admin, that admin doesn't exist. So whatever the username you have created for that, so EC2 hyphen user, right? So I selected that. We will change that password. So now the username and the password is changed. After that, what we did, we know that the by default password authentication is disabled on all the Linux hosts. So we need to enable that. So there is one file that is called sshd config. So we go vi edit. So here I enabled that password authentication. right? As soon as I will enable that password authentication, now you can give that username and password to any third-party vendor or a client so that they can land it to that jump server. Similarly, if this is a secure machine and currently your developers are using that username and password, right? So in that scenarios, what you can do, you just disable that username and password authentication and create one account for that EC2 and enable that key authentication. And for that key authentication, you just use any of the IAM tool to push that private key to users putty on the backend, and they don't have a rights to access to that private access key to read that, right? So in that way, we can secure our instances. Any question in that?
No. So here, how to add that host name instead of IP? How to connect with the host name?
So for that host name, right? First of all, if you want, okay. So now, first of all, who asked me? I will ask you one question here.
Harsh here.
Harsh. Okay, Harsh. So now, let's suppose I want to connect to this EC2 instance with the host name, like you said, right? So can I create a record for this?
Yeah, right. We can create it. Yeah.
Or let's suppose I want to connect with the private IP with the host name. So what I need to do?
Private IP with the host name.
One answer you automatically gave yourself, right? I will create a DNS record. So what else, right? If I want to
record.
No, but I am right now outside, right? From that AWS environment, then how I can use that a record for that private IP?
We can use so like once we configure DNS and a report, then we'll get a URL, like domain name. With that we will connect. So instead of IP, we'll type the domain name.
From open internet?
Yeah.
No man, how it will work here?
No, like if it is like a DNS we have configured here, route 53.
No, now let's suppose I am not using a route 53, right? And I am in your environment. Let's make more easy. I am in your environment and I want to connect with that host name. So what I need to do?
Let's say in switch level or router level, like we first enable domain.
Leave switch router.
Okay.
Now you tell me. Yeah, Naresh, you was giving any answer.
Netting will be the prefer.
No, yeah, I have to use host name, that private host name to connect. I am already in your AWS environment. You guys, let me give you a hint. I will use some VPC option.
I don't remember what is that.
So when you are in your own environment, right? So you tell me first. So let's suppose this is your own environment. Harsh, you asked me this question, na?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to answer it.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is your on-prem environment, right? Whether you want to take a cloud environment or an on-prem environment, this is a jump server. And this is your machine, right? So you want to connect it through there. For that public IP, you answer yourself that you will create a record, and through that record, you will logged into that. But now let's suppose you are within that environment. Why you want to create a record, right? For that. So you want to use its own host name. So for that host name, what you will do?
Okay. So
Elias.
Naresh,
Yeah, sir, we could create the
what?
DNS for that. The
If
card.
if this machine is in my domain, this machine is in my same domain, right? Then definitely through that NetBIOS host name, I can log in. Yes or no? You know what is NetBIOS? Please don't say no.
yeah, I know.
Okay. And
No, sir.
no, sir, you mean no, we don't know or we cannot connect?
I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. Guys, go through that NetBIOS because this is very basic. Okay, let me ask you one more question, right? What is SMB?
Yeah, this is the bus
Sorry.
service authentication.
Sorry, यार क्या बनेगा? What is SMB? पहले बताओ आंसर कौन दे रहा है? What?
Naresh is here.
Yeah, Naresh sir, tell me what is SMB?
We guys were using that application to patch the Windows server to allow the communication in between the WSUS to the Windows machines.
So you mean to say that this is for authentication?
SMB protocol is used like an application to transfer the data, Windows data, I think. SMB version 2, 3, like one.
Good. So no, you answered that right?
Am I incorrect?
No, sir, you are right. But now you go to the next step. So now let me explain. So guys, those who are on the class, right, go through that. What is NetBIOS now? So no, one last question in that SMB. Your answer is right. So SMB protocol is used to transfer that files, right? So you said that we use versions. So how many versions we have in that SMB?
SMB version 2, 3, and I think 1 might be there.
What is the difference?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
No problem, guys. This is out of that cloud, right? But if let's suppose, like, if right now we will connect to that same machine through that NetBIOS host name, right? And if he says that, okay, so if you have a common file share server, right? So to connect to that file share server, you should need a SMB connectivity within your environment. Right. So as an interviewer, I will say is that, okay, so you have a file share server in your environment, right? So how you will protect that? First of all, it should be in that domain. My client should be in that domain. This is fine. After that, SMB connective, through that SMB connectivity, I will not use that MSRDP or any non-secure port. But in that SMB, Sonu sir, go through that version. We have a version 1, version 2, and version 3. So you have to ensure that whenever we enable that SMB service on my Windows clients or on Windows servers, it should be on a V3, because with V1 and V2, it is compromised. Why? Because with V1 and V2, when we are using authentication, right, that username and password can be captured through a Wireshark. Right. So that is why whenever you use any file share here in your environment, as a security consultant, you have to ensure that what protocol and what version it is using. Done. I hope you know what is SMTP and SNMP. In SNMP, again, we have a versions. Which version needs to be used and why? Here, go through these basic protocols. Sure. One last thing, only 5 more minutes. Then if you have any query, right? Next week we will cover WAF, right? So tomorrow we will cover HSM, KMS, Athena, and Messi 4 services. So one last thing I want to cover is there is one term called WAF and Shield, right? So WAF is Web Application Firewall and Shield is a tool that protect our environment from a DDoS attack, right? So when we enable that Shield, right? So by default, earlier Shield was not enabled for our environment, but now they have by default enabled AWS Shield for our complete VPC, right? So if you want to subscribe your advanced Shield environment, so what you need to do, you just click on that, that's it. Nothing needs to be configured on that. But again, this is one of the costliest solution in that AWS, because here you have to pay $3,000 per month for your account, right? So as soon as you will enable, there is no configuration, just you need to subscribe for that advanced, and as soon as you will click on that advanced one, right, they will start charging you 3,000 per month to protect your account for advanced DDoS connections. So I hope you know what is DOS and DDoS, right? Sir, what is
Yes.
DOS? Tell me what is DOS and what is DDoS?
And basically, if we go into the definition, denial of service and distributed denial of service.
So what is the difference between denial of service and the distributed denial of service? Okay, no problem. Sandeep sir or anyone else?
I mean, the DOS will be the source will be the unique, and distributed will be coming from the different source, or it could be the random.
Good. So this is the major difference. So what else? So now as in okay, let me go to that slide, right? Then we will also. So when we says that DDoS attack, right? So that means that if it is already covering, right? So what is AWS Shield first? So I generally ask these questions in the interview, right? So that AWS Shield protects from DDoS attacks, right? So what is there is one attack, as Naresa tell, one is DOS attack, one is DDoS attack. DOS means denial of service. DDoS is dynamic denial of service, where your source is changing, right? So let's suppose if this is a machine, if this is a machine, right, and let's suppose any of a hacker install any bot on my machine, right, and now my machine is generating that attack to one of website, right? So one of the websites, so this is keep generating a DOS attack. So in that DOS attack, it might be a ICMP flooding, right? It might be a SYN. You know what is embryonic connections? Sir, yes, no, otherwise I will explain. Okay, so when we say, okay, so when we say embryonic connections, right? So you know there is one SYN, right? When we send SYN, then request will come as a ACK, right? Then we send a SYN plus ACK, right? So this is a TCP handshake, right? So let's suppose I send a SYN request. I send a SYN request. It's this website sends me ACK request. So after that, what I need to do, ideally I should need to send SYN plus ACK, right, to establish a TCP connection. What I will do, I will send a SYN. I received ACK. I will not send SYN ACK. Again, what I will do, I will again send a SYN request. They will send me ACK request, right? I will not send SYNAC. Again, I will send a SYN request. They will send me SYNAC request. So here what we are trying to do, because now it is expecting that I will send a SYNAC, right? So it is expecting that I will send a SYNAC. So its buffer interface, its interface buffer will store that connection for, let's suppose, 60 seconds. For that 60 seconds, it will wait that, okay, I will receive that SYNAC. Similarly, immediately I send from new connection from SYNAC, right? So he also sends that ACK, and again, it is expecting that, okay, so I will wait for 60 seconds to wait for that SYNAC, right? It might be that application is busy. So if with this way, I keep sending SYNAC, but I am not sending SYNAC, right? I am sending SYN, I am receiving ACK, but I am not sending that SYNAC. So website interfaces keep its buffer is complete using my memory, right, to store all the connections and waiting for that SYNAC. So in that 1 second, I, let's suppose, send 1 lakh connections. So where we have a incomplete connections, that incomplete connections are called embryonic connections. So this is one of the type to generate a DOS attack, right? So with that embryonic connections. So for that embryonic connections, like for our firewalls, right? My Palo Alto Firewall or a Cisco firewall, there was in Cisco, there is a term called modular policy framework. In Checkpoint, there is a security profile. And similarly, in Palo Alto, we have a security profile where we can restrict that embryonic connection. So in that firewall, we can restrict 30. So after 30 connections, if my firewall sees that still same source is sending that embryonic connections, it is sending SYN, server is replying ACK, but it is not then giving confirmation as a SYN-ACK, then after 30 connections, all the 30 connections will be blocked and that dropped by firewall. Again, you have to generate that, right? But it will block that, but it will not identify that this is a DOS attack, right? So for that, we have to use a DOS protection control tools. So in normal DOS attacks, right, this is the behavior, right? So this DOS attack is generally blocked or by AWS Shield. Earlier, it was not free, but now AWS is enabling that AWS Shield for our all account. But if you want an advanced AWS Shield, you just need to enable or subscribe that service. As soon as you will subscribe that service, they will charge $3,000 per month, right? So it is very costly. So you just calculate that in 1 year, right? So in 1 year, you are, how much you are paying? $36,000, right? Just to protect for a DDoS. So you have to ensure, other than that, it is protecting you for advanced DDoS. I will tell you what is advanced DDoS attack, as well as, right, you will get a support, right, DDoS. Similarly, if there is a spikes, protection against a higher fees during a usage of high spike. Similarly, layer 7 attack. So now let me explain you that. So this is, I told you, one normal DOS attack, right? With DOS attack, with that example of embryonic connections, right? So what is that DDoS attack, right? So let's suppose here my firewall, or let's suppose my IPS knows that I am getting this embryonic connections from this IP, right? So my as a firewall, I will, with that embryonic connection or with my security profile, I will block these connections after the limit of embryonic connections. But if, let's suppose, I am using any DOS or a security tool, or let's suppose I am using a layer 7 IPS signatures for DDoS protection. So what they will do, they will see is that this is the malicious IP which is generating that DOS flood for my application server. So they will add that IP in a DDoS protection, so that whenever it will hit to my firewall, right, it will block that IP. So no request will hit after 30 embryonic connections to reach to my web server, right? So this is one case of DOS, but as DDoS, right? So dynamic DOS. Here I have a website. Here I have a website in London region. Here I have a website in the London region. So as a hacker, right, first of all, I will schedule that on which date I want to target that, right, this website. So what I will do, so let's suppose I have decided that on 25th of December, right, I will target this website on a Christmas to down this website. So what I will do from November itself, I will start preparation. So what I will do, I will create one bot, right? I think ideally I should not tell you, right? But we can create there are multiple open source tools. Even if you will Google it, right? There are multiple open source through that we can create a viruses, Trojan viruses or bots. So I will create one of the bot. I will insert that bot in any of the image or in the file, and I will keep sending that image or file to multiple users, this user, this user, this user, right? So let's suppose if these users are not intelligent users, so they open that image or they open that link, right? So that bot will be installed on that. So on 25th of December, right, I will activate all the bots with that command and control. I am moving outside from AWS topic. So with that command and control, I will activate all the bots, and from that date, right, if that this is in US region, this is in EMEA region, this is in APAC region, this is in Australia region, right? So they all will start sending a dynamic DDoS attack. So in that DDoS attack, so normal DOS attack is embryonic connections or a ICMP1, but in advanced, like they will send a HTTPS sessions, right? So in that HTTPS sessions, first it will build a TCP connection, right? TCP handshake will establish, and then in that HTTPS session, they will synchronize. They will ask me to provide me what is the secure and advanced hashing algorithms, encryption algorithms you are using. They will exchange that Diffie-Hellman, right? And after that, they will keep sending a new request within that connection. They will create in one connection. After establishing connection, only one session will establish. They will again send a new connection. So I will receive a multiple requests from multiple regions. So that is called a DDoS attack, where I am getting that attack from multiple dynamic IPs, right? So for that, we are using a advanced advanced AWS Shield. Similarly, F5 has also its own tool for DDoS. Akamai service we are using on the ISP level to protect from a DDoS, right? So with that scenarios, we can use the advanced protection. But again, as I said, that don't say that we need to enable that advanced Shield, right? AWS is selling that. Okay, so for your environment, first of all, you decide that do you actually need that AWS advanced Shield, because by default AWS Shield is enabled for that common DOS attacks or a DDoS attacks. But for that advanced one, first understand your business, that what actually publishing from your cloud to the clients, is it for everyone? Is it any payment service or a payment gateway, or are you getting any revenue from that, right? What revenue? If it is more than 36,000, right, then you can think about that. Otherwise, I will say is that if this is just a jump server through that you have to land to your environment, then there is no need to use AWS Advanced Shield. Okay. Is it clear? Then I will ask you one more question. Yes, sir.
1:45 p.m.
Okay, only one last question. So let's suppose this is your website. Nothing related to this course. This is just related from an interview perspective. So this is a website, right? And you want to protect your website from a DDoS perspective. So now what answers you will give me?
I'll use the Cloudflare free version.
Cloud
Cloudflare free version.
Flare. That is again for a DDoS protection, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is also part of AWS Shield. Okay. So one option is AWS Shield. Okay.
This is not a part of AWS. Cloudflare is the different entity. It is not a part of AWS.
Okay. What is that Cloudflare?
Cloudflare is the web-based firewall, okay, which is providing the solution of the DDoS and DOS protection, everything. Even it is providing the SQL injection.
Okay. Right. So we go through that WAF, right? So this is a WAF solution, right? So one is I can use AWS Shield. One is WAF. What else?
You can use next generation firewall.
Okay, I will use next generation firewall. Yes.
F5 ASM. F5 ASM system.
Okay, that again covered. Yes.
Palo Alto Cloud
Sir,
based
वो
firewall.
हो गई next generation firewall, right?
वो
So
उसका cloud based भी लगा सकते हैं, हाँ.
right. Okay. So in interview perspective, right? So you says that, okay, he says that I have a very critical application, or if I have an e-com website, right? And if I want to protect from a DDoS perspective, so now you can say is that we can enable an AWS Shield, right? We can use a WAF, right? We can use a next generation firewall. Other than that, what is the next is cloud fraud edge locations, right? So as I said that if I will use that edge location, so my website will be cached in all the regions, even if that attacker will attack on one of my source. If let's suppose this is deployed in a London region, right? But still the users who are in Australia, the users who are in India, or the users who are in US, they can access my website through their nearest edge locations. So with that edge location service, through that CloudFront, I can also mitigate that DDoS attack in my environment. Right. So whenever you will answer in the interview, also mention, you give right answers. You will use AWS Shield, Cloudflare, WAF, next generation firewalls, F5 or Akamai, whatever. So guys, if you are saying time is done, then let's close. Otherwise, okay, so now you tell me, right? So one last question, give me answer tomorrow. So this is one of the website, right? And I am using a CloudFront. And with that CloudFront, this website is now available in globally in all edge locations, right? But as per my compliance, right, this device should not be accessible from a EMEA, what we say is that Gulf countries. From Gulf countries, it should not be accessible. So what I will do in that, if you want to answer it today, I will be happy to discuss.
Geolocation protector.
Very good. Harsh?
Ashim.
Okay, good. Yeah. So for that, what I will do, Hashim, we will use a Route 53 geo protection, right? From that specific locations, we will restrict that traffic, that if from that regions users want to access that website, it should not resolve. Good. Okay, guys. So if you have any query, I'm happy to answer that. So tomorrow we will cover that KMS, HSM, and KMS, HSM, and we will cover that Athena and Messi service. And Naresa, will you send your design today?
Yes, I will send it to you over the WhatsApp.
Okay, and there was one more girl who was sending that. Okay, no problem. Naresh, at least you send it, right? So we will review your design and tomorrow we will discuss that. Okay.
Okay.
So guys,
is that your number, right?
Yeah, you know my number. I am added on that group.
Okay.
You pinged me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, guys. So if you have
Manpreet, yeah, I have a query.
Yeah, Harsh. Yes,
regarding
please.
that AWS firewall.
Yes.
So is there any other lab you will be, performing on the AWS firewall?
No.
No.
What
Okay.
is your query?
Yeah, my query is that like how we will configure for DNet traffic, like from public to instance we want to connect. Then what kind of configuration or netting will perform?
So there will be no netting on that AWS firewall, right? So for that, what you have to do right now, like we are using a IGW, right? So after that firewall subnet, you can use a NAT instance.
After IGW, we have to perform a net, right?
No. So Harsh, that NAT gateway is always behind that IGW.
Yeah, right.
Right. So what we will do, we will discuss one of more designs perspective scenario for that AWS firewall, right? So just remind me, right?
And like how something like netting concept.
Okay. And tomorrow, one more thing.